If he doesn't like his nose, why do you think he puts it on the logo? Do you think someone picked it for him?
So it's not his actual nose, right? Isn't it
No, that's his real nose.
Why is it big and round?
Because this is One Piece.
This is the intro song to the podcast King of the What Now. Join us as we go on a journey, going to talk about pirates, battle and adventure. We think we're pretty funny, we hope you will too. Luffy, he's gotta be the king of something. We weren't really listening, sorry about that. Hopefully he'll achieve his dreams, yeah.
Hello, fellow adventurers of the Grand Line. I'm Joel, your host, and with me as always, this is my co-host, Curtis.
Hey, can you unchain me?
No, I don't think so. I think I said we had to get through Alabasta, which is quite a ways away. I will give you a bathroom break after we get done with the Orangetown arc, which is apparently what this arc is called.
You don't know what it's called?
The early episodes all blur together to me, and I just think of it as the East Blue arc. But no, I don't remember the name of this specific town that we're in right now.
You disappoint me, Joel.
I know. We're 5 episodes in, and already you can see the chinks in my armor. All right, so fantastic. Would you like to walk us through the summary of this episode?
Yes. So Nami tries to screw over Luffy, turns him into Buggy the Clown, and then finds out that Buggy's going to kill Luffy. And then's like, oh, well, I can't let him do that. And so then she goes to save Luffy by putting out a fuse with her bare hands on a cannon.
Okay.
Buggy gets mad. We've met Buggy, by the way. We can talk about that more later.
Yep.
Comes to kill Nami. Nami is the mysterious girl, and we know her name now. Mm-hmm. And then Zoro comes in to save her. We find out that Buggy's power is that he can detach body parts and then reattach them, and he can like move them independently and all that.
Yep.
So what happens is Zoro goes to slash through him, and he just detaches himself at those locations, so it just goes right through. And then he gets stabbed. So they have a little fight, and then Luffy wants to break out. Him and Zoro have a moment. I don't know how Zoro figured this out from a stare, but he goes and flips the cannon around, points it back towards Buggy, and then Nami lights it. Instead of running out of the way, Buggy sits there and screams at the cannon. Mm-hmm. The cannon lights, and that's the end of the episode.
That's fantastic. Now, earlier I gave you some crap for your summaries not being summarized enough. Would you believe that maybe perhaps this time I think you've glossed over too many details?
I think I hit all the main things.
Okay, that's fair. I would add that it's not like this episode just starts with Nami tying up Luffy. We get a little bit of, they have a conversation. She basically tells these 3 pirates that are running after her, she tricks them into thinking that she and Luffy are working together, and then she runs so that Luffy can take care of the fight. He easily beats them because, as far as we can tell, Luffy is never going to struggle at all throughout this series.
Yeah.
And then they go to a place to eat because Luffy is always hungry because he is a shonen protagonist. Seriously, that's like always their default emotion or character trait, is that they get really hungry after battle. Anyways, we find out that she is trying to save up 100 million berries, which we've only ever heard berries really used in one other case, for the mountain bandits. Let's circle back to that in a second. But she wants to steal 100 million berries. She only steals from pirates. She hates pirates. Someone close to her was killed. We don't know who. Also, she hates pirates. Also, she's a thief. She loves tangerines and money. Also, she hates pirates. And she basically, Luffy says, I'll help you out, or something along those lines. And she goes, okay, here, let me just tie you up. We're going to pretend to turn you in air quotes. But then she does turn him in.
Yeah.
And stuff like that. I'd also argue that I don't think that she really was like, I can't let Luffy die. I think it was more, I don't want to be the one to pull that trigger. Because Buggy was like, why don't you do it to prove your loyalty to me? And that's when she was like, wait, hang on a second.
Well, it wasn't just that she didn't want to pull the trigger, because she went in, after someone else lit the cannon, she put it out.
Okay,
she didn't want to be, because she tied him up and took him there, right? She didn't want to be responsible for his death.
Right. Absolutely. Which actually, that brings me to another point really quickly. I believe that a common thread through the different characters in One Piece is usually the good guys are unwilling to kill. Luffy will never, like, look at the camera, or no one will ever ask him, and he won't just say, like, oh yeah, I don't believe in killing. But Oda has said that in Luffy's mind, defeating an opponent and letting them live with that misery is a worse punishment than just killing them.
Yeah.
So, I believe that Nami we don't know what her role is going forward, although the intro to the show makes it pretty obvious where you know what I'm saying? It's kind of gives you a little bit of a hint as to what her future might be. But I believe that she is a good person, capital G, capital P, and that means she's unwilling to kill, and I think that she is unwilling to be implicit in that same kind of behavior. So, now, I have a list of questions that I came up with when we were starting this idea for this podcast, and my thought was, I'll ask you these questions every episode. But then eventually I kind of realized, not a lot of them make sense. I have one on here for who is best boy. And, in the last episode, we got introduced to quite a few characters. A couple people on Shanks' crew. We met the mayor of, I think that's called Syrup Village, maybe? I don't know. But in this episode, we only met one character. So, the question, who is best boy, doesn't make much sense. Because the answer is either whoever was previously best boy or Buggy. However, one of the questions that I'm not going to ask every episode, I only ask when it's applicable, is who is the MVP of this episode? And when we're watching this episode together, I turned to you and I went, oh, MVP is definitely Nami. She put out that fire with her bare hand or whatever. That's pretty badass. But then Zoro, after having been stabbed and looked like he was about to pass out, lifted this giant cannon and flipped it over in order to take out all of their enemies in one fell swoop. So my question is, who is MVP of this episode?
See, it's a hard one. I think what it comes down to, ultimately, is, I don't know. I think it's my feelings for Metal Jesus.
Okay.
Their actions were equally impressive, and so Metal Jesus comes out on top.
That's true. If you also think of it from a utilitarian point of view, she saved Luffy's life, and yeah, he's the main character, but that's one life. Whereas Zoro flipping the cannon and getting it to go off, that they showed the party, Buggy threw a party, and there were quite a few of them. So in terms of number of good guys saved versus number of bad guys taken out, his was actually the larger.
Yeah, and plus, it's Nami's fault that Luffy's in this position anyways, right?
Okay, so she's just making up for her past mistake, sort of thing. That makes sense. Now, I mentioned something about berries. By the way, Ventures, if you're unfamiliar, berries is just the term used for money in this show. I don't believe that they have different currencies for different islands. It's just this global economy. As far as I can remember, I don't think there's anywhere on the main islands that takes anything other than berries as currency. But we've now had two instances of a dollar amount assigned to something. We had the mountain bandits from last episode. His bounty was 8 million berries. I assume dead or alive. And then in this episode, we found out that Nami's trying to save up 100 million. So, Curtis, do you think, million's a big number, but in the grand scheme of things?
I think it's going to sound larger to an American audience than it would sound to a Japanese audience just because of the way our different currency systems work.
Mm-hmm.
So just for a little bit of context, though, I'm assuming probably anybody listening to this podcast already knows.
Sure.
1 Japanese yen is approximately 1 cent in the US. It's not exactly, and the error obviously gets bigger than larger the number.
Sure.
So if you take that equation, 100 million is going to be 1 million. So that's a lot of money.
It's quite a bit of money.
And there was one of the bandits in the last episode had a bounty on his head that was 8 million, I think,
million, yep.
Which would be about $80,000, assuming we're doing yen to dollars, which is still a lot. It's just not there's a difference mentally of hearing million versus 80,000, right?
Oh, absolutely.
I guess, still she's trying to steal $1 million or 100 million berries or, I guess it doesn't need to be an equivalency thing, but.
Sure. Well, and if I type in, 100 divided by 8, or if I just try to do that in my head, that's 12 and a half. So do you think that Nami can take on 12 and a half mountain bandits in her current state as she is now? She had a pretty cool bow staff that seemed to be able to block some sword attacks.
Yeah, that's true. I don't know. I haven't seen much of her fighting, actually. It seems more like she is the mischievous con artist type, right?
Sure. If she were playing a D&D, she'd probably be the rogue. She wouldn't be able to take very many hits, but she's kind of fast and pretty smart.
I think given the right circumstances, she could take on 8 of those mountain bandits, or 12 of those mountain bandits. But I don't know if she could do it just in a head-to-head fight, right?
Absolutely. Okay, that makes sense. And again, the shonen genre, I'm having a hard time with my words today. The shonen genre it's targeted towards young boys, so I'm sure that the men in these sorts of shows are usually very good, and the women are probably usually kind of more support roles, maybe not necessarily combat focused, that sort of thing. So I would say that Nami kind of fits the generic female characters that I've seen from other shows in this genre. So what do you think is up with Buggy's nose? Because one of the first scenes we see of him on camera, someone says something like, "It's as plain as the nose on your face," and he loses his mind. He gets upset. And when Luffy is challenging him to like, "Hey, I'm going to take you on," he says, "Your nose is dumb," and the entire crew just goes deadly silent. They go, "Oh no."
Joel, are you sure you want to talk about his nose?
Yeah, I mean, he could come after us, and
Sounds dangerous.
Absolutely. We all have heard of all the different devil fruits that allow people to come out of the TV and assault random podcasters who discuss them.
Yes. So I'm not sure, because at first I just assumed it was like he was wearing a clown nose, but then it quickly became apparent that he doesn't like his nose, and if it was a clown nose that he was wearing, he could take it off.
Yep.
So either he had like some clown nose fused to his face in like a freak clowning accident.
Yep.
Or he has like a defect, or like, I guess, like it's just the way his face is.
Okay.
But then, like, how did that happen?
Yeah, exactly. Did the chop fruit also give him the red nose somehow? That doesn't make sense. We haven't seen devil fruits affect people in that physical way before, but maybe this is a new version.
It could be, yeah.
The other thing too is, why would he make that his Jolly Roger with the red nose on it? Because I understand that, like, the title, like, Luffy is eventually going to be known as Straw Hat Luffy. A slight spoiler alert, but I assume people are familiar with that term, and it doesn't give away too much details. But, so I assume that people would call Buggy Red Nose Buggy, or maybe Buggy the Clown because he dresses like a clown. But he can choose whatever logo he wants, so why would you, if you hated people commenting on your nose, make that your freaking emblem?
I know. I mean, it seems like he's tried to take two different approaches to his nose simultaneously. Mm-hmm. So one is, I'm just going to lean into it and dress like a clown, so the nose makes sense. But at the same time, as soon as somebody mentions his nose, he freaks out. It's like you can't do both.
Absolutely.
Like, you have to play it cool and just live with it, or do the opposite, which is like try to hide it. But I don't know how you'd hide that thing, so I don't know.
I mean, he did eat the chop fruit, so like, what if he just chopped it off and just
carried
put
it
it
in
somewhere
his pocket?
else or something? Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, it'd probably be better to go with like a Voldemort like snake hole nose, as opposed to just the big red one. Absolutely. Like, you could just be like, I lost my nose in a cool pirate fight, as opposed to, I have a big red nose and I dress like a clown.
Absolutely. So from Buggy, we've got his special Buggy Balls, which I think makes almost anyone who watches the show giggle every time they hear it, which is this big, powerful explosion cannonball. Seems to do way more damage than a regular cannonball.
Yes.
He seems adept with daggers, at least to some degree. He has the cool devil fruit power. So if you take all of that into the equation, and the fact that he seems fairly ruthless, do you think that he's a threat?
I think at this point in the series, he's a threat.
Okay.
He seems like he is at least going to be fairly difficult to defeat, in terms of like Zoro can't really do any damage with his swords. Mm-hmm. That being said, the episode ends with a cannon pointed at him and the cannon being lit and about to shoot a buggy ball at him.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we'll see. But my assumption is that the threat will continue and he'll still be hard to beat. But this being episode 5, I don't know if long-term he's a threat.
Sure. You think that if we get to episode like 300 and I'll be like, do you remember that time that they struggled with Buggy? You'll just kind of like laugh and be like, yeah, those were good times back in the day.
Yeah.
We also haven't really seen Luffy struggle so far. He's really only had 2 fights, really, in the grand scheme of things. Alvida and then Captain Morgan. And neither of them gave them any trouble. He seemed to just kind of, once he decided to punch them, that was it. So maybe Buggy isn't a threat once Luffy gets out, but maybe getting him out of that giant stone cage is going to be the hard part. Maybe they've nerfed him, so to speak. And maybe he'll come back later and he'll be like, oh yeah, cool, just one gum pistol to the face and you'll be out.
I did ask you this earlier because my understanding is that the limits to your devil fruit powers are your imagination.
Yes.
He's made of rubber. Can't he just stretch himself thin and fit through the bars or out of the ropes? But it doesn't seem like they're doing that. I mean, I'm just guessing it's for the plot. But it seems like if he really wanted to, he could escape.
I agree. I believe that there's a limit to how far he can stretch, how elastic he is, in terms of, not in terms of making himself thinner, but in terms of when he reels back for a punch and the fist goes out and then I cannot tell you. I know that I don't believe, he reached his hand through the bar to grab some food, and he didn't squeeze through at that time, so there must be some limit to it, but at the same time, I'm not sure why he can't just compress himself down to a certain, maybe it's like what's the word I'm looking for? Maybe it's a density thing. Maybe his bones have a certain density, his blood has a certain density, so you can't squeeze it down a certain size.
And I mean, even with rubber, so I guess I'm not saying like squeeze it down, but stretch it out. It's like a rubber band, you can't, well, I guess rubber band's not a great example, but like with rubber, you can't like necessarily squeeze it to make it any thinner, but if you stretch it, it becomes like thinner, and it stretches longer, but then the thickness reduces.
Sure.
So,
but how capable has Luffy shown himself to be in terms of being able to control his stretchiness? If he was just standing still, no momentum or velocity or anything, and he just decided that he wanted to shoot his head up like 2 feet in the air, like, I think he's stretchy enough to do it. But as far as we've ever seen, the only time that he actually stretches is when he actively moves his hand. Listeners/adventurers, I wish you could see me kind of waving my arm like a giant dork, but I think that it's the momentum that makes him stretch, and I think being tied up, I don't think he can get enough speed to be able to stretch himself thin enough to escape. Also, you have to remember that there's like this giant party of people who are, probably keeping an eye on him a little bit.
that's true.
So if it takes him more than a second to escape, they'll just cut off his hand or whatever.
Yeah. No, that makes sense.
Okay, before I go into a couple of other questions, do you have any other thoughts about the episode just kind of in general?
This is the first one where I feel like we had a fight that actually felt a little bit more important.
Okay. Important or tense?
Tense.
Okay.
Yeah. Previously we had some, but even the one in the courtyard where Zoro was tied up in that wasn't too tense. Like, it felt like it kind of went by fairly quickly. But this one feels like Buggy the Pirate is a slightly more difficult opponent. Like, it's like before that was kind of like a tough opponent. Buggy the Pirate is like a level boss, right?
Okay, sure. I could see it. No, absolutely. And I think we're eventually going to get to the point where things start to be a little bit more challenging. I think we've reached that, or you're starting to sense that we're reaching that.
Yeah.
But I certainly look forward to more thrilling battles that aren't just this person's, like, it feels a little bit like rescue mission-y so far. With Morgan, Actan Morgan, Zoro was tied up. With Alvida, Kobe was in danger of being attacked by her own captain. And even right now, Luffy is tied up. So, I mean, if you can imagine, there might be a scene later where there isn't anyone who's in danger, and the danger that the enemy possesses is not, oh crap, he might hurt someone else, but oh crap, he's a threat to me, the main character or whatever. So that's all good. Question: do you think that when when his arm comes off, and it doesn't need to be cut, if he gets cut by a sword, he can control it, but he can also just purposefully detach. Do you think he saw a sensation in the part that comes off?
I would assume so.
Okay.
Because it'd be hard to hold something in your hand if you didn't
have any feedback.
Yeah.
Which means, theoretically, the limitation is your imagination. One of the first things that I would do, take out my eye. I'd have one eye stay in my body, and I'd have the other one float around, because it looks like he can freely, like, levitate them and stuff. He could look around corners and stuff, and have an enemy try to shoot just, like, a single floating eye, that they'd probably miss. You'd be free of danger, I think.
Yeah, no, that's actually a good point. I wonder how much mental capacity it takes for him to continue to control a separated...
piece.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and so I did say that the devil fruits are more powerful the stronger the imagination, or they're limited by the imagination only. I do think there are limits. I don't think that he would be able to take off his hand and launch it all the way to the other side of the island. There's probably some kind of a range. In fact, spoiler alert, there's a thing. But anyways, I just think that he could be using his powers more smartly. He's a stronger threat than the previous enemies we faced, but he just needs to apply himself, man. All right, I got some questions that came up after we recorded the last episode that I like to talk about. So listeners, if you are confused because, did Shanks show up in this episode? They just mentioned Shanks. No, I just realized that I'm an idiot and I should have asked these during the last podcast, and I forgot to. So,
Let's rewind.
All right. How good of a pirate do you think Shanks is?
I would assume he's a good pirate. He seems like it. I mean, just one of his crew took out a bunch of bandits without much difficulty at all.
That's true.
Just in general, too, they seem to give him an aura of, like, awesomeness. Mm-hmm. But I guess we don't really have anything to compare it to, so...
I guess that's true. We haven't seen Shanks try to fight. How many Act 10 Morgans do you think Shanks could take on in a fight? We haven't seen a scene like that where we see him do something and then have another character do the same thing and you can't tell. I would say that if you had a show where someone wants to be the best chef in the world and they go up and there's like Gordon Ramsay and he goes, return this spatula to me after you've become a great chef. Like, that holds a certain amount of weight. But if you just went to like some family diner off of the interstate, right, and there's like, you know, some guy named Joe. No offense to anyone named Joe out there. My name's very similar. I feel your pain. But you know what I'm saying? Just like a guy who goes, hey, take the spatula, bring it back when you're a good chef. Like, that wouldn't make for very interesting storytelling.
Well, I mean, it could. I could see some fun adventures there.
You have someone show up to the diner, and they take the spatula, and they think that Joe is a weird guy, and then they leave. And then the camera zooms back on Joe in the family diner. It's alone. No one has come in. There are no more patrons. People don't come to this place very often. It's kind of a last-ditch effort when they need food in an emergency situation. And he sighs, opening up the drawer that has 50,000 other spatulas. He's been giving these out for years, and not one person has returned having accomplished their mission. And he goes to the calendar and he crosses off another day, and then the calendar falls, and behind it is a picture of him in the Chef Hall of Fame in his youth, in his prime. He was a fit, strong young man. You find out that Joe's wife was killed because she ate an improperly cooked hamburger. So now the only way that Joe can redeem himself is to find a young person to carry on his legacy, to become the next great chef. And he still holds all this hatred in for himself. And the reason that maybe he's an overweight guy who doesn't seem to care, and maybe his diner's falling into disarray, is because he misses his wife.
I feel like this is another podcast.
Joe the Family Diner Man, coming out sometime in 2045, maybe. That sounds about right. Can't promise it to come out next week, because then if I miss that deadline, people will get upset. So, also, we now have two characters who have these kind of backstories that we don't really... They've given us little hints. When Zoro was tied up, we had flashes of that girl. We talked about whoever she was when he was younger. And he also mentions in I think it was last episode, the flashback episode, that he went sailing looking for, quote-unquote, a certain man, whatever that means. And now we have Nami, who says that someone important, quote-unquote, to her was killed by pirates. So do you think we're just going to get like a series of flashbacks, like one episode where nothing happens in the present, but we get just 20 minutes of Zoro as a child or Nami as a child?
I would think so. My assumption is that we're going to get a bunch of them for all the characters who are yet to come.
Okay.
I mean, what episode is the series on now? Like 300, 400, 500 something?
800.
Okay,
Yes.
800 something. So you've got lots of room to expand on backstories there.
I will say this, and again, this is a slight spoiler, I guess, but the flashbacks and the narration and the explanations get much more detailed. Like in this episode, Nami just says, I'm looking for 100 million. I hate pirates. Pirates killed someone important to me. And you get this kind of like this bullet point, like, hi, I have a one-sentence bio on Tinder or something, right? Like it's a really short summary, and they just tell you right away. They get better later on, where a character will walk into a room and it'll show a flashback the last time they're in that room, and you're like, oh, that's it. They don't turn to the camera and say, someone important to me was hurt. You have to figure... you don't have to figure it out because it's blatant to you, but the characters themselves never just outright state their goals and motivations. And so now I'm going to put you on the spot. A, who is Zoro looking for? Who was Zoro looking for? B, who was important to Nami that got killed by pirates? C, is the person Zoro looking for a person who goes around killing random family members so that their stories will converge?
I think that's a good question, Joel.
Those were 3 questions.
Well, combined they are one good question.
Okay, I see.
So On their own, they are 3 mediocre questions individually.
Okay, by the law of averages, that's how that has to work.
Yes. So I think that Zoro is out looking for Oprah Winfrey,
Okay.
who killed Nami's father.
Okay. With a lead pipe in the observatory.
Yes.
That's kind of the way that you were saying
Yes,
that.
yes. And Nami's father?
Yes.
Nami's father?
Yeah. Okay, what about...
Yeah, Nami's father is somebody who I'm thinking of right now.
No, Nami's father is red-haired Shanks. How could you not have figured that out? His hair is red, her hair is orange. The connection is obvious.
No, you're right. It's definitely red hair. It's definitely Shanks. So Oprah Winfrey killed Shanks.
Okay.
Thanks, Oprah.
That's... what a wonderful... We've both had fan fiction moments. You inserted Oprah Winfrey into the canon of One Piece, and I came up with Joe, the man whose wife died because of a hamburger. So maybe we could do a crossover episode where Oprah comes to a diner and she needs food, and it's made by Joe. And then there could be an episode of Oprah where he's on the show.
See, I know what's going on, right?
Okay.
Zorro was in the audience for an episode of Oprah. Everybody got free cars, except for him. He never got his free car. So he's hunting her down. He wants his free car.
You know, another thing that just occurred to me, Zoro specifically said, I was searching for a specific man. Are you making comments about a hidden truth behind Oprah, or did you just...
No.
You improv too hard, didn't you?
Yeah, no, you can chalk that up to poor memory.
Fair enough. I want you to take this question seriously. We are
Okay.
trying to have fun with this, but what do you think would make sense for Zoro to be looking for?
I think he's looking for the person who kept beating him when he was young.
Okay.
At
Who's
swords?
also a woman?
Oh, crap. I don't know who he's
You know what?
looking for, Joel.
This question might be too hard. I'm expecting you to come up with a thoughtful answer because I know the answer, and so it's like, well, obviously, if you just work backwards, this is the only motivation that would make sense for a green-haired swordsman guy. But you don't know, and you're going to say that it was Nami's father who was killed. I mean, that one could very easily be.
No, I was just pulling random relationships out. I mean, it could be anyone from family to love interest, right?
Okay.
I don't think that we really have enough detail to know.
Figure that out?
Yeah.
All right, fair enough. I can't speculate for obvious reasons, but just keep your eye out for the man that Zoro is looking for and someone close to Nami who was killed. Those will be important later, and Oda's very good at foreshadowing. There's a lot of stuff that happens. There's already been something in the last 5 episodes, I won't tell you which one, that gets answered way down the line. And when Oda started, dropping hints, something important is coming... I can't give you an example, but something as important is coming. I started scratching in my head and go, doesn't this remind me of something that happened way, way earlier in the series? And then when that happens, when he reveals, I don't know, the man that Zoro is looking for happens to be red-haired Shanks, who also happens to be Nami's father who was killed, and all the pieces connect, it's really cool because he obviously had a plan. He had Zoro mention he was looking for someone in episode 4 or whatever, and now in episode 396, you find out that there's a lot of people looking for this mysterious man, and Zoro was just the first one to be on that quest. I don't really leave you room to respond to any of that. That was just me fanboying all over the show.
Well, I hope you clean up afterwards.
Wow. Okay. The other question that I'm always going to ask every episode is, what do you think will happen next episode? What are your predictions? And if you bring Oprah Winfrey into this, I'm cutting you... You know what? No, I'm not cutting you out of the show. I'm going to assign you another show where we go through another long-running series and we analyze every episode by episode.
Doctor Who? Starting with the old
Starting
Doctor
with the
Who?
old Doctor Who, or Case Closed is another anime that I believe is one of the longest-running manga series ever, and it's just... when I watched it, there was no overarching plot. There was a big question that they wanted to answer, and you'd go, it felt like hundreds of episodes before they'd come even close to kind of answering it. I've heard they've picked up, but there you go. There's probably 800 episodes of that as well, and it's just a little kid playing Sherlock Holmes.
Okay, that'll be my punishment.
That will be your punishment if you bring Oprah Winfrey into your prediction for next episode.
Okay, so next episode, Ellen DeGeneres. I'm just kidding. Okay, next episode, So we have the cannon pointed at Buggy. That's where our episode ended.
And we never really
right?
saw like the flames coming out of that, so it probably they didn't stop it from going off.
Yeah, so I think Buggy's going to use his power to avoid it somehow. Probably because he can take pieces apart from him. He can independently move pieces of his body. Maybe he'll just chop himself up and spread around, right? Mm-hmm. And get out of the way of the explosion. As opposed to he just ran to the side. But, because it's an anime, you have to do it in a spectacular manner. So he'll do that. He'll get out of the way. Meanwhile, they will get Luffy out of the cage. Zoro will go up and cut the lock off or something, right? And then we will have a fight battle.
Okay. Well,
as opposed to a non-fight battle.
As opposed to a dancing battle. I mean, that's a thing. You could have a dance off.
How about a tea time battle?
Okay, fair enough. I want to go back to the dance battle thing because do you think that if Buggy were to dance, his moves would be extra flashy?
Buggy would win in a dance battle.
And he absolutely has the moves. Luffy doesn't know.
He could do the worm really well.
Yep, absolutely.
But, I mean, Buggy's a clown. And he looks like the type that would know how to dance well.
Oh, sure. Absolutely. That is something that I also felt we both forgot to mention in the recap is that Buggy definitely has the nose thing is definitely a trigger, but he also has a favorite catchphrase, and it's flashy. It's, we execute people, flashily, shoot that bird out of the sky, flashily. This is my flashy special Buggy balls. I swear every time he mentions them, he adds another adjective, and eventually by episode 13, I'll be like, this is the great, wondrous, exciting, super, amazing, cool Buggy balls. But anyways, he has the word flashy that he adds to just about everything, and again, it's almost like he has a dual identity. It's like he's ashamed of who he is, but he can't deny it. And if that's not a metaphor for something, I don't know what could be.
I kind of feel bad for him.
Sure.
Life has given him a hard lot here, and he just isn't handling it well, right?
That's certainly true.
He's really a tragic figure, I think. Buggy the Clown. He's a sad clown.
He's a sad clown. Like all the other clowns from all the other popular media that we've ever seen.
Any more questions?
No, I think that's... Oh, do you have any speculation as to what Nami needs $100 million for? She just won a really fancy boat.
I guess I just assumed she wanted to retire. I never really thought about it until you asked.
But that's a very specific amount.
That is it could just be a goal. It's good to have goals.
Okay.
But no, it's a good point. I mean, I'm assuming that she probably needs the $100 million for something specific, like to bail someone out of jail, or to rebuild the community center in a small farming town.
Absolutely.
Something like that.
Okay. Yeah, that makes absolute perfect sense. All right, everyone. I think that's just about everything that we have. I don't know if there's much more to speculate on. We'll be able to go on to episode 6 next, and we hope that you'll join us. Until next time, stay awesome and stay flashy. All right, folks, we've reached the end of this episode for today. It's sad to see you go, but fortunately we'll be here next week unless we get hit by a meteor. In the meantime, you can follow us on all sorts of different social media. We have Gmail, Patreon, Tumblr, all of those are King of the What Pod. So patreon.com/King of the What Pod, King of the What Pod @gmail.com, kingofthewhatpod.tumblr.com. That's all great. If you want to follow us on Twitter, that name's a little different. They restrict the length of your handles. So you can follow us on Twitter @Kotwin_pod. That's KOTWN_pod. Just take the name of the podcast and abbreviate it.
Also, please take a moment to rate and review our podcast on whatever platform you're using to listen. That can be iTunes, Spotify, or whatever. Not only will this help others find the podcast, but your constructive feedback will help us improve the show as we go. We hope to grow and improve just like the Straw Hat Crew.
Thanks again for listening in. Be sure to check the feed next week for the latest episode of King of the What Now. Until then, follow your dreams and protect your treasure.
Remember, that doesn't need to be literal treasure.